Under the vast sweep of the Colorado sky, where summer storms rose out of nowhere like angry spirits, the dust came thick and fast, swallowing the land in a brown wall that seemed to move with a will of its own. Ethan Cole had barely driven the last nail into a fence post when the horizon darkened, and the howl of the wind turned the prairie into chaos. He cursed low, the kind of word a man mutters when there is no one around but God to hear, and hurried the horses toward shelter. His hands were calloused, his body seasoned by work and grief alike, yet his movements held urgency, because storms on the frontier didn't ask permission before they took what they wanted. The wind clawed at his clothes, and the grit stung his eyes. But even through that living wall of dust he saw something, a figure, staggering, bent double, clutching something tight to the chest, as though holding life itself together. For one breathless moment, he thought he imagined it. Then a small voice broke through the roar. "Papa, someone's coming!" Emily's words carried from the porch, high and clear, like a bell in the storm. Ethan's daughter was fearless and too quick for her own good, the way only children could be. She darted from the house, boots kicking up dust devils that vanished as fast as they were born. "Get inside, Em!" Ethan shouted, but the wind swallowed his warning. His chest tightened as he saw her run toward the stranger. The woman collapsed just as Emily reached her, and the bundle in her arms gave a frail, heart-breaking cry, the sound of an infant caught between fear and hunger. Emily's little hands went around the woman's neck with all the innocence of hope. "Mama!" she cried out, clinging as if the storm itself could not pull her free. Ethan froze mid-stride, the words piercing him sharper than any blade. "Mama." Emily hadn't spoken of her mother in months. Not since Margaret's grave had been dug beneath the cottonwood tree, not since fever had stolen both wife and unborn child. "Emily, no," Ethan said, voice gentling as he scooped his daughter up, yet his eyes never left the stranger's face. Exhaustion was carved into her features, but her green eyes, startling even under a mask of grit, met his with desperate pride. "Please," she managed, lips cracked, voice nearly lost to the storm. "Just until it passes, my boy. He needs shelter." It was not in Ethan to turn away a soul in need. Even broken men carry honor. He wrapped a steadying arm around her while holding Emily close with the other, guiding them toward the small house that had too long echoed with silence. The prairie raged, but inside his walls there would be warmth, bread, and the faint lavender scent Margaret had left behind. The ranch house was plain timber and adobe, 2 rooms and a kitchen, but to the weary stranger it might have been a castle. She sank into a chair, still cradling her baby. Ethan noticed the child's shock of dark hair, his lungs strong enough to cry though thin from travel. He poured water, his rough hands oddly gentle as he placed the glass before her. Emily perched beside her, patting her arm with childlike confidence. "Don't cry," Emily said solemnly. "Pa fixes everything." If only, Ethan thought. His heart carried scars no fixing could smooth. The woman drank deeply, turned modestly aside as she nursed the infant, and whispered gratitude. She told him her name was Clara Monroe, her boy Daniel. She had come walking from Bent's Fort, chasing rumors of respectable work. Respectable. The word carried the sting of judgment, of whispers that clung to a woman alone with a child and no ring to defend her honor. Ethan didn't ask more. The prairie already wrote its stories in hard lines. He could read enough between hers Emily, ever curious, chattered questions about horses, about Bible lions, about stories her mother once told. When Clara smiled, weary but radiant, Ethan felt something crack in the wall around his heart. That smile carried life, messy and uninvited, into a place that had been nothing but empty air and aching echoes. The storm pounded the windows. Inside, he set plates for 4 instead of 2, beans and cornbread warmed again by firelight. Clara tried to help, but he made her sit, telling her she looked ready to drop. Through supper, Emily filled the silence with laughter, and even Ethan found himself fighting a smile he hadn't worn in months. When Clara corrected softly, "Miss Monroe, not Mrs." He heard both pride and pain laced in those few words, and he understood. Later, after the meal, while the baby slept in the sewing room that had once been Margaret's sanctuary, Ethan stood by the window. He listened to Clara's low humming, her voice blending with the storm's whistle, and for the first time since death had taken his wife, the house didn't feel like a tomb. It felt alive, like it was waiting for something new to take root. Clara approached quietly, her presence steady as the scent of soap and sun-warmed skin she carried. She confessed her past in fragments, a man who abandoned her, a truth that towns would scorn, the label of fallen woman chasing her like a curse. Ethan's jaw tightened, but his answer was simple. "You're under my roof. That makes you decent folk in my book." It was not love, not yet, but it was the first thread of healing, thin, fragile, and necessary. Outside, the storm began to die, leaving behind silence sharp as a blade. Tomorrow the sun would rise, and she would speak of moving on. Emily would beg her to stay. Ethan would retreat behind his fences and his silence. But tonight they breathed the same air, bound by need and something deeper neither dared to name. And as the last gust rattled the shutters, Ethan allowed himself one dangerous thought. Perhaps the storm had not brought ruin, but the first chance of a beginning. The next dawn broke clear, golden light spilling across the land as if the heavens themselves had scrubbed it clean. From the kitchen drifted the scent of coffee, of biscuits, of life returned. And Ethan Cole, widower and weary, followed the sound of Clara's singing to find his home no longer silent. The story of healing had only begun, and the frontier was watching. And as you listen, if these words stir warmth in your heart, if you feel the tenderness of a home found in the storm, I invite you to like, to comment, to share your thoughts, and to subscribe for more stories that carry love and comfort. Let this tale settle into you gently, like the hush after rain, and let it remind you that even in the loneliest deserts, storms can bring the seeds of new life. The morning after the storm dawned so clear it almost hurt the eyes. The prairie bathed in the kind of golden light that made even hardship look momentarily forgiving. Ethan woke to sounds he hadn't heard since Margaret's passing, the hiss of a kettle, the soft shuffle of someone moving in his kitchen, the faint melody of a woman's voice wrapping around the walls like a blessing. For one fragile instant, half caught in dreams, he thought it might be Margaret herself, her laughter spilling into the room with the morning sun. But when he rose and followed the scent of biscuits and coffee, it was Clara he found, her baby tied to her chest in a sling fashioned from one of Margaret's old aprons. She had already been to the yard, fed the chickens, and was now stirring scrambled eggs with one hand while gently rocking Daniel with the other. Emily sat at the table, hair a wild tumble of curls, tongue peeking from the corner of her mouth as she practiced her letters on a slate. Clara's voice was low, soothing, and the sound of it braided through the air with the aroma of fresh bread, until even Ethan's grief, sharp and relentless as barbed wire, felt dulled for the first time in months. "Morning," Clara greeted softly without turning. "I hope you don't mind. I wanted to earn our keep for the night." He paused in the doorway, taking in the picture like a man starved of colour who suddenly finds himself in spring. "You didn't have to," he said at last, his voice rough from sleep. "I wanted to," she answered, finally glancing back, her hair pinned up neatly so that her green eyes seemed brighter, her cheeks touched with a new warmth. There was vulnerability in her face, yet also quiet pride. "I'm not one for taking charity." At the table, Emily bounced in her seat. "Pa, she makes eggs better than you, and she knows songs about lions and kings." Ethan grunted, pouring himself coffee more to steady his hands than out of thirst. But inside something small and healing shifted. Margaret had once filled mornings with laughter. Now, Clara's presence brought something gentler but no less alive. Over breakfast, Emily chattered about plans for the day, how she would show Clara the prairie roses, introduce her to the horses, maybe even let her hold her rag doll, a treasure she guarded from everyone else. Clara listened, smiling behind her coffee cup, her boy dozing content against her chest. The sight etched itself deep into Ethan's mind, like the prairie sun burning shapes into the horizon. "Miss Clara's going to town today, Em," he reminded gently, though his chest felt tight as he said it. "She's got work to find." Emily's face fell instantly, the corners of her mouth trembling. "But she just got here." Clara's hand stilled on her cup. For a long moment she said nothing, her gaze on the baby's sleeping face. Then quietly, as if testing the words, she spoke. "I was wondering if you need help around here. I noticed the garden needs tending, and there's mending piled up. Harvest is coming soon, isn't it?" Her cheeks flushed as she trailed off, as though she feared presuming too much. Ethan studied her in silence, his jaw set. Every sensible instinct told him to refuse. Already the gossips in town would have sharp tongues. Already Margaret's memory haunted him at every turn. Yet when he looked at Emily, who had scooted her chair closer to Clara's without thinking, when he saw the spark of hope in his daughter's wide eyes, the refusal died on his lips. "I can't pay much," he said instead, hearing his own voice like it belonged to someone else. "Room and board, mainly. Maybe a little extra when cattle sell come fall." Clara's shoulders sagged with relief, her lips trembling into a smile both weary and luminous. "That's more than fair, more than generous." "There'll be talk," Ethan warned, though softer this time. "People in Redemption Creek have nothing better to do than gossip." "Let them talk," Clara replied, her voice firmer now. "I've heard worse." So it was decided. In the days that followed, the Cole Ranch shifted in ways Ethan hadn't realized were possible. Clara worked like a woman who had long ago learned survival meant never standing still. By the end of the first week, the kitchen gleamed brighter than it had in years. The garden sprouted new rows, the laundry smelled of lavender she had pruned herself, and Emily's slate carried not just letters but numbers Clara had begun to teach her. Daniel was an easy child, content to watch the world from his mother's sling, tiny hands reaching for sunbeams or Emily's curls. Emily adored him, crooning lullabies she half remembered from Margaret, ones Clara gently picked up and carried when the girl faltered. Ethan found himself drawn to those moments, the way Clara's voice wrapped the children in safety, the way Emily's laughter once more filled the rafters. The house smelled of bread and soap again, not of absence. It felt alive. Yet peace on the frontier was always fragile. When Ethan finally hitched the wagon to take Clara into Redemption Creek for supplies, he knew it would test more than just her strength. He knew the town. He knew the women whose tongues were sharper than any branding iron. They arrived just past noon, dust rising under the horses' hooves. Redemption Creek was a modest place, a single street lined with a saloon, a church, the general store, and a scattering of homes. But it carried weight, the kind that came from eyes always watching. Mrs. Abigail Thornton spotted them first, standing outside the mercantile with her entourage, corset cinched tight even in the heat. Her gaze fixed on Clara beside Ethan, Daniel in her arms. "Well, Ethan Cole," she sang, her voice sweet as honey and just as sticky. "How nice to see you in town. And who might this be?" Ethan helped Clara down from the wagon, steadying her with a firm hand at her elbow. "This is Miss Monroe. She's helping out at the ranch." "Helping out?" Mrs. Thornton's eyebrows climbed high, her eyes sliding to the baby. "How enterprising." Clara met the scrutiny with her chin lifted. "Yes, ma'am. This is my son, Daniel." "And Mr. Monroe?" The question was honey laced with poison. "There is no Mr. Monroe," Clara answered, her voice steady despite the heat rising in her cheeks. Silence rippled through the gathering women, broken only by whispers sharp as needles. Ethan stood like granite, his hand tightening at Clara's elbow, but the damage was done. He could feel their judgment like grit beneath his skin. Inside the store, the shopkeeper greeted them kindly enough, but his wife's suspicious glances trailed Clara with every step. Clara shopped with quiet dignity, choosing only what was necessary, though Ethan noticed the tremble in her hands when she touched a bolt of calico cloth. "Don't let them bother you," he murmured, close enough for only her to hear. "I'm used to it," she replied, forcing a small smile, "though I'm sorry to bring it to your door." "My door's weathered worse storms," Ethan answered, and this time her smile reached her eyes, quick and bright as lightning. But as they left the mercantile, Reverend Thomas approached, his kind eyes shadowed by concern. Ethan braced for what was coming. Propriety, reputation, Emily's future. Words sharpened by good intentions that cut all the same. Clara slipped away to search for ribbon for Emily's hair, leaving Ethan to face the minister. "Ethan," the Reverend began gently, "you're a good man, but you must think of how it looks. A widower taking in a woman with complications. It may be admirable in intent, but appearances matter." "What's not seemly," Ethan said, his voice flat as stone, "is turning away someone who needs help." Still, the Reverend's words gnawed. By the time they returned to the ranch, Clara silent beside him, Ethan felt the weight of every stare, every whisper. He wondered if his choice would one day cost Emily the childhood she deserved. That night, under the glow of a pale moon, he found Clara on the porch, rocking Daniel, her face worn yet steady. She spoke first, her voice low. "I should go. I won't have Emily suffer because of me." "She's not suffering," Ethan said sharply. though doubt prickled inside. "Not yet," Clara whispered. "But they'll turn their whispers to her soon enough." "Let them," he growled, though fear tightened his chest. The night air was alive with crickets, the scent of sagebrush drifting like a healing balm. Clara turned her face to the stars. "I was young once, foolish enough to believe promises. Daniel's father spoke of California, of fortunes and fine houses. By the time I knew it was lies, I was carrying his child. He left, and the world has called me fallen ever since." Ethan's jaw clenched. "Daniel's no burden. Neither are you." Clara smoothed her baby's dark hair, her voice trembling yet fierce. "He's the only good thing that came from it. But try telling that to townsfolk who see only sin." For a long moment they sat in silence, the cicadas' chorus rising around them, the prairie stretching endless under starlight. Then Ethan spoke, his tone softer than it had been in years. "My wife used to say respectability was just fear dressed up in Sunday clothes. Fear of standing out, fear of being different. She said the only thing that mattered was doing right by the people you cared about." Clara's eyes glistened in the moonlight. "She sounds wise." "She was," Ethan admitted. "Wiser than me." The baby stirred, and Clara rose to carry him inside. At the door she paused, her silhouette framed in lamplight. "You've got a place here, Ethan Cole, as long as you'll have me. But I won't bring ruin to your girl." Her voice was both a warning and a plea, and as she disappeared into the house, Ethan sat with the weight of choice pressing heavy on his shoulders. Respectability or compassion, fear or the fragile, dangerous hope Clara carried into his life. The prairie was quiet, holding its breath, as though it knew the decision would change everything. The storm that woke Ethan came not from the sky, but from his daughter's terrified cry. The night was black as pitch, rain hammering the roof in steady sheets, when Emily's voice shattered the stillness. He was out of bed in an instant, bare feet pounding down the hall. Her small body shook against his chest, heat radiating from her skin, breath wheezing in ragged gasps that dragged him back to the night Margaret died. The helplessness, the fear, the sound of lungs failing despite all his desperate prayers. "She can't breathe," he whispered to himself, clutching Emily tighter as if strength alone could keep her alive. Then Clara appeared in the doorway, hair unpinned, Daniel swaddled close against her heart. One glance at Emily, and her face went pale. "The croup," she said, already moving, swift and steady. "We need steam, now." In the kitchen she had water boiling before Ethan's mind had even caught up. Herbs from the garden, peppermint, eucalyptus, healing scents that rose with the steam and filled the room with a balm sharper than any memory. Clara pulled a blanket over the chair, trapping the warmth, her voice a low, soothing hum that cut through thunder and fear alike. Ethan held both children while Clara slipped beneath the makeshift tent, her body close, her hand stroking Emily's damp curls. "Breathe with me, sweetheart, in and out, slow as a summer breeze. You're safe." The girl's tiny chest fought for air, each breath a battle. Ethan's heart tore at the sound, his eyes burning. But gradually, beneath Clara's steady rhythm, Emily's gasps softened. Colour crept back into her cheeks. The terrible rattle eased until it was only a cough, harsh but no longer deadly. Ethan clung to that moment like a drowning man to driftwood, his daughter alive, his daughter breathing, And Clara there, her calm the very anchor he hadn't known he needed. When at last Emily drifted into exhausted sleep, he carried her back to bed, brushing his lips across her temple with a prayer of thanks. In the grey light of dawn, Clara sat slumped at the kitchen table. Daniel curled in her lap. Her hair was tangled, her gown damp with steam and sweat, yet Ethan had never seen a woman look more radiant. She had given him back his child. She had given him back hope. "Thank you," he said, the words raw and inadequate. "You would have managed," she murmured, though both knew the truth. Without her, Emily might have been lost. Something unspoken hung between them, delicate as spun glass. Ethan reached across the table, his rough hand brushing hers. She startled, then let her fingers rest against his, her pulse fluttering. "You're more than you believe yourself to be," he said, voice low, "and you belong here more than you know." Her eyes met his, green depths shimmering with emotions she fought to hide. Fear, longing, disbelief. "She needs a mother, Ethan. But I can't." "You already are," he interrupted gently. The silence stretched, heavy with possibility. Clara's lips parted, then closed. She gathered Daniel to her chest and rose, her steps light but unsteady as she slipped toward the sewing room. Ethan remained at the table long after, staring at the morning sun spilling across the worn wood, knowing something had shifted forever. From that night forward, the house no longer felt like a hollow shell of memories. Laughter returned, warmth returned. The days unfolded with a quiet rhythm, Clara baking bread, Emily trailing her through the garden, Daniel cooing in his sling while Ethan mended fences with an odd peace settling in his chest. The prairie, wide and merciless, seemed suddenly less lonely. But shadows never stayed away long. The peace was broken one afternoon as Clara carried laundry in from the line. A rider crested the hill, the sun at his back, arrogance in his posture. Clara froze, recognition curdling into dread before her mind could even form his name. Lucas Tate. The man who had once whispered promises of forever, then vanished into the wind when faced with the truth of her swelling belly. The man who had left her to shame and struggle alone. Her grip on the laundry tightened until her knuckles whitened. "Emily!" she called, voice calm though her blood ran cold. "Take Daniel inside now." The child obeyed, sensing something in Clara's tone. Alone in the yard, Clara stood as Lucas reined in his horse, a smile curling across his lips. The charm that once dazzled her now made her skin crawl. "Well, if it isn't Clara Monroe," he drawled, swinging down from the saddle. "Took me some time to find you." "What do you want, Lucas?" Her voice was steady, though her heart pounded like a drum. He tipped his hat, eyes glinting. "My son." Her breath caught, fury igniting beneath her fear. "You gave up that right the day you left. Courts might see it different." His smile sharpened into a threat. "Especially when they hear you're living under a widower's roof. A woman like you, reputation already in tatters. They'll hand him over to me before you can blink." Clara's body shook, but not with weakness, with rage. "You'll never take him." "We'll see." He mounted again, lazy as a snake. 3 days, darling. Pack your things, or I'll let the law do it for me." He rode away, leaving dust and the stench of old lies in his wake. Clara stood trembling, clutching the laundry basket as though it might hold her upright. When she turned, Ethan was there, rifle in hand, eyes like storm clouds. "Who was that?" His voice was iron. "Daniel's father," she whispered, the words tasting like poison. Ethan's jaw tightened, the rifle lowering only slightly. "Then he's made himself my enemy." Clara wanted to argue, to say this was her burden, but Ethan's gaze left no room for doubt. She was under his roof, under his protection. And though fear gnawed at her, so did something else, a dangerous, healing certainty. She wasn't alone anymore. The prairie stretched silent around them, the horizon endless and unforgiving. Yet in that moment, with Ethan's steady presence beside her and her children safe within the house, Clara felt a fragile thread of hope twine through her fear. A storm was coming, yes, but perhaps for the first time she wouldn't have to face it alone. And if this story brings you comfort, if the warmth of it touches your heart the way the morning sun softens a cold night, let your voice be part of it. Leave a like, share your thoughts in the comments, subscribe for more. Stories like these are meant to heal, to remind us that even in the fiercest storms, love has a way of finding shelter. The days ahead would test that truth, dragging old wounds into the light. Yet with every breath, every glance, every fragile promise, Ethan and Clara stepped closer to becoming not strangers bound by chance, but a family forged in fire and faith. And as the prairie wind whispered through the cottonwoods, the horizon promised their journey was only beginning. The fire came like a thief in the night, its first warning a thin curl of smoke threading beneath Clara's door. She sat bolt upright, the sharp tang burning her throat, her heart leaping into her mouth before her mind caught the truth. Flames. In an instant she was on her feet, rushing to the window. The barn was ablaze, orange light licking high into the midnight sky, sparks flying like angry stars. "Ethan!" she cried, tearing through the hall, snatching Daniel from his cradle and dragging Emily from sleep with shaking hands. Ethan was already awake, boots thudding as he seized his rifle from the wall. His eyes caught hers, fierce and steady, even as smoke rolled in waves. "Get them to the root cellar, now!" "But the animals," she began, choking on fear. "I'll handle it. Go." She obeyed, every instinct screaming against leaving him, but the children's cries anchored her. She carried them through the yard, heat slamming into her skin, ash falling like snow. The root cellar's wooden door yawned open, dark and safe. She shoved Emily inside, pressing Daniel into her arms. "Stay with him. Don't come out until I say." Emily's eyes were wide as lanterns. "Mama, where are you going?" Clara kissed her brow, voice trembling but firm. "To help your pa. Be brave, sweetheart." When she turned back, her blood ran cold. Beyond the blaze, standing at the edge of firelight, was Lucas Tate. His face glowed with satisfaction, eyes glinting like a predator's. She knew instantly this fire was no accident. "You did this," she gasped, fury slicing through her terror. He shrugged, casual as if he were commenting on the weather. "Warned you, Clara. You could have come easy, but you chose stubborn. Now see what it costs." "You monster!" she hissed. "Those animals never hurt you." "Cole hurt me. Thought he could take what was mine." His smile twisted. "This is just the start. Accidents happen on ranches all the time. Be a shame if something happened to that little girl of his." Cold fury filled her veins. "If you touch Emily, I'll kill you myself." "Big words from a fallen woman," he sneered. Better to pack your things. Come back to me now. Save everyone the trouble." "I'd rather die." Ethan burst out of the smoke then, soot streaking his face, rage in every line of him. "You bastard!" His voice was a growl, raw and dangerous. Lucas pulled a pistol, spinning it lazily in his hand. "Wouldn't, if I were you. No law against watching a fire." "There's law against starting one," Ethan shot back, stepping forward. "Prove it," Lucas smirked, then mounted his horse with lazy grace. 3 days, Clara. Then the boy's mine." "You'll see." He rode into the night, leaving flames and ruin in his wake. They fought until dawn, hands blistered from buckets, eyes stinging with smoke, side by side in desperate rhythm. By morning the barn was a skeleton of charred beams, 4 horses lost, equipment gone, the heart of Ethan's work reduced to ash. Clara collapsed in the yard, tears cutting clean tracks through soot. "This is my fault," she whispered. "My past, bringing destruction here." Ethan dropped to his knees, pulling her against him, uncaring who saw. "No, this is Tate's doing, not yours." His arms were iron, his voice breaking with a truth he could no longer hold back. "I won't lose you, Clara. Not when I just found you." The words stunned her, raw confessions spilling into the dawn. Then his mouth was on hers, fierce and desperate, tasting of smoke and survival, and a love neither dared name until fire had burned everything else away. She kissed him back, pouring all her fear, gratitude, and aching hope into that single breathless moment. "Tomorrow," he rasped when they broke apart, foreheads pressed together. "We marry. Not in a week, not when it's safe. Tomorrow. I'll see you under God's eyes and the law's before Tate tries anything else." Clara trembled, but her heart surged with a strange, healing certainty. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Ethan." The wedding came at noon, hurried yet sacred, the church filled with neighbours drawn by the fire's rumours and the promise of scandal. Clara wore a dress stitched hastily from Margaret's old gown, and though her hands shook, Ethan's steady grip anchored her. When the Reverend asked if he would take her, Ethan's "I do" rang with a strength that silenced whispers. When Clara answered, her voice was clear, unbroken. They sealed their vows with a kiss softer than the one forged in flames, yet carrying more weight than words could hold. The town erupted in cheers, though in the back Clara caught Mrs. Thornton's sour expression, lips pursed like vinegar. Still, Ethan's hand in hers drowned it all out. For the first time since her world had collapsed, she felt not just sheltered, but chosen. But peace was brief. Before they even left the church steps, Sheriff Watson approached, grim as stone. "Congratulations, folks. Hate to interrupt, but Tate's filed papers with the territorial judge. He's claiming custody of the boy." Clara's knees nearly gave way, and Ethan's arm tightened around her waist. "On what grounds?" Tom Bradley demanded from the crowd. "That Miss Monroe, Mrs. Cole now, was unfit. That the marriage is a sham to steal his rights as the father." The words cut deep, though Clara clung to Ethan's side. Around them the town buzzed with whispers, eyes sharp with judgment. Yet Ethan's gaze burned steady, his jaw hard as granite. "We'll fight," he said. "And we'll win." That night, their first as husband and wife, Clara sat at the small vanity, brushing her hair with trembling hands. Ethan entered, hesitant in the doorway of what was now their shared room. Neither spoke of duty or propriety. The vows had bound them. But what lay between them was heavier still. He knelt beside her chair, took her hand, kissed her knuckles with reverence. "You don't have to be Margaret," he said softly. "You don't have to be anyone but Clara." Her eyes filled, the brush slipping from her fingers. She leaned into him then, and when he held her, it was not out of duty, but out of devotion that had already taken root in fire and storm. "Stay with me," she whispered against his chest. "Nowhere else I'd be," he vowed. And as dawn broke once more over Redemption Creek, with judgment looming and shadows gathering, the Cole house stood not in silence, but in fragile, fierce unity. Their fight had only begun, but together they were more than storm and fire could destroy. If this moment of resilience touches you, if the warmth of their courage softens something inside, I invite you. Leave your thoughts. Let your heart speak in the comments. Press like and subscribe so more stories of healing and love may find their way to those who need them. Because sometimes, even in the harshest places, stories remind us. Love not only survives, it builds, it heals, it burns brighter than fire itself. And beyond that morning light, the trial awaited, a battlefield of words and judgment, where the truth of their bond would be tested for all to see. The courthouse in Redemption Creek was nothing more than a weathered wooden building, its walls thin enough for whispers to slip through. Yet on the morning of the hearing, it carried the weight of a cathedral. Every bench was filled, neighbors pressed shoulder to shoulder, their faces taut with curiosity, judgment, and something sharper. Clara sat between Ethan and Tom Bradley, Daniel in her arms, her palms damp against the child's blanket. Though the air smelled faintly of sawdust and dust motes danced in the slanted light, she felt suffocated. The walls too close, the room too small to hold the enormity of what was about to unfold. Judge Harper entered with the stiffness of a man who believed order itself depended on his hand. He tapped the gavel once, and the chatter died like a flame snuffed. "We are here to determine custody of the minor child, Daniel Monroe," he announced, his thin lips twisting. "Mr. Lucas Tate, the petitioner, claims paternal rights. Mrs. Clara Cole contests on grounds of abandonment. Proceed." Lucas rose, dressed in a fine suit that did nothing to hide the arrogance simmering in his eyes. His voice slid through the room like oil. "Your Honor, I come as a father wronged. I admit my youth led me astray. But I have returned to reclaim my son, to offer him the home, the name, the future he deserves. Instead, I find his mother rushed into a sham marriage with a widower, desperate to keep me from my rightful child." Murmurs rippled through the benches. Clara's throat tightened, but Ethan's hand settled over hers, steady, grounding, carrying that quiet, healing strength she had come to lean upon. When it was Clara's turn, she rose, her knees trembling, yet her voice clear. "Your Honor, Mr. Tate left when I was heavy with child. No word, no coin, nothing. I did not deny him his son. He denied us both by walking away. I worked, I struggled, I kept Daniel alive when no one else would, and I did not marry out of fear or deceit. I married because I found a man who gave us safety, respect, and love. That is no sham." Lucas smirked, as though the words were nothing. "She lies, Your Honor. She never told me of the child until it suited her. Now she hides behind Mr. Cole's name, hoping to erase her shame." The judge's brow furrowed, and Clara's chest burned with indignation, but before she could answer, a soft cry cut through the tension. Emily had wriggled free from Mary Bradley's grasp in the back row, and now ran down the aisle, her little boots thudding against the planks. She flung her arms around Clara's skirts, her voice breaking with tears. "Please don't let him take Daniel. He's my brother now. Clara's our mama. She makes biscuits and sings to us when we're scared. Don't let the mean man take him away." The room erupted, gasps and whispers colliding. The judge banged his gavel, but Emily's sobs lingered, raw and unshakable. Clara gathered her close, whispering, "Hush, sweetheart," though her own tears burned hot. Ethan rose then, tall and unflinching. "Your Honor," he said, his voice steady as granite, "I have watched Clara with my daughter and with Daniel. She is the finest mother I've seen, patient and strong, never asking more than she gives. She saved Emily's life when sickness struck. She gave my home back its laughter. My late wife would have admired her, and I—" He paused, the silence thick, his gaze never wavering. "I love her. I love these children. We are a family, and no man's lies can undo that." For the first time, Lucas faltered. His charm cracked, bitterness spilling. "You'd raise another man's bastard and call it family?" Ethan's jaw clenched, but it was Clara who spoke, her voice sharp and trembling with pride. "Yes, because family is not just blood. It's who stays. It's who fights for you when the world turns cruel." The sheriff cleared his throat from the corner. "Your Honor, if I may, this Mr. Tate has a record. Fights, debts, warrants in Fort Bent for fraud. He missed 2 supervised visits already." The judge's pen stilled. The room held its breath. Finally he looked from Clara to Ethan, then down at Emily still clinging to Clara's skirts, her cheeks wet but her eyes fierce with childlike truth. "Mr. Tate," Judge Harper said, his voice flat, "your absence and record weigh heavily against you. Mrs. Cole, though your marriage was hasty, the testimony and evidence speak to a stable, loving home. Custody of the child remains with his mother and her husband. Mr. Tate's parental rights are hereby terminated. Sheriff, see to the warrants." The gavel struck like thunder, and with it, Clara's knees nearly buckled. Relief, disbelief, joy and sorrow tangled until she could scarcely breathe. Ethan caught her, his arms strong around her waist, holding her steady as Lucas shouted protests, dragged from the room by deputies. Outside, sunlight blazed across the dusty street. Neighbors gathered, some congratulating, some whispering, but Clara heard only Ethan's voice at her ear. "It's over. You're safe. He'll never touch you or Daniel again." Her tears spilled freely, not of fear, but of release. She looked at him, this man who had carried her through storms and fire, who had fought not just for her survival, but for her dignity. And for the first time she believed, not in luck, not in chance, but in grace. Healing grace, fierce and quiet, given through love she had never expected to find. That night, when the children slept, Clara and Ethan sat on the porch, the sky scattered with stars like scattered prayers. She leaned into him, her head against his shoulder, his hand covering hers. "We have 60 days, she whispered, thinking of the judge's probationary period, of the eyes that would still watch. "We have forever," Ethan corrected softly, pressing a kiss to her hair. She smiled, the kind of smile that came from the marrow, fragile and sure all at once. The prairie wind carried the scent of sage, cool and soothing, as if even the land itself whispered healing. If this moment brings warmth to your heart, if it reminds you that family can be chosen and love can heal the deepest wounds, let your voice join in. Share your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe so these stories of tenderness and resilience can reach others who need them. Every word of encouragement is a lantern in the night for someone still searching. And as the night deepened over Redemption Creek, Clara knew their fight was not done. Whispers still lingered, and shadows would test them. Yet, in Ethan's arms, with her children safe, she believed with her whole heart, whatever storms came, they would face them together. And together was everything. The night after the judgment, when the town was still humming with gossip, and the scent of victory clung like wood smoke, Ethan could not sleep. He lay in the darkness, listening to the house breathe, the soft rustle of Emily turning in her little bed, the deeper sigh of Daniel in his cradle, the almost inaudible sound of Clara's steps in the next room. His wife. The word echoed in him like a bell rung for the first time in years, equal parts terrifying and tender. He rose, padding quietly across the hall, finding her seated in Margaret's old rocking chair, Daniel nestled in her arms as she hummed him into slumber. Moonlight streamed through the window, silvering her hair, painting her in light that made her seem both fragile and strong beyond measure. "You should rest," he murmured, leaning against the doorframe. She smiled faintly, not lifting her gaze from Daniel. "So should you." He crossed the room, kneeling at her side, watching the slow rise and fall of the baby's chest. "I meant what I said in court," he whispered. "Every word." Her eyes finally met his, shimmering with emotions she fought to contain. "I know," she said softly, "but it changes everything, doesn't it? Saying it out loud." He took her hand, rough and scarred, wrapping it around his. "No, it doesn't change a thing. It only makes truth harder for the world to deny." She looked down at their joined hands, her lips trembling. "I want to believe that. I want to believe we can build something whole here." "You already have," he said, voice thick with certainty. "Look at this house. Look at Emily. Look at me." Her breath caught, and for a heartbeat, silence wrapped around them like a blanket. Daniel stirred, then settled again. Clara leaned closer, forehead brushing Ethan's. "Then promise me," she whispered. "Promise we won't let them tear this apart." His arms encircled her, careful not to wake the baby, and he pressed his lips to her temple. "I promise." "Whatever storms come, we face them together." The word together pulsed through her like a healing chord, loosening something long bound inside. She let herself lean fully into him, not out of weakness, but out of trust, and in that quiet midnight hour, they began to feel less like two broken souls bound by circumstance, and more like a family forged by choice. The days that followed tested that fragile peace. Clara rose with the dawn, tying her hair back as she kneaded dough, her hands steady, though her mind often drifted to the whispers she overheard in town. Ethan worked the fields with renewed vigor, every swing of the axe, Every fence mended a vow to protect what was his. Emily thrived under Clara's gentle teaching, her letters steadier, her laughter freer. And Daniel grew, chubby fists clutching at everything within reach, his giggles warming the house like sunshine through storm clouds. Yet the shadow of Lucas Tate lingered, his threats woven into every quiet moment. Though he was gone from sight, his name haunted conversations, carried by gossips who waited for the next scandal to bloom. Clara braced herself each time she stepped into town, chin lifted, dignity wrapped around her like armor. Ethan walked beside her, steady as a wall, his presence declaring silently to all, "She belongs here, with me." One evening, as the sun bled gold across the prairie, Ethan returned from the fields to find Clara and Emily in the yard, their skirts dusted with earth, planting new shoots in the garden. Daniel sat nearby in his cradle, babbling to the sky. Clara's laughter rang out at something Emily said, light and unguarded, and Ethan stopped in his tracks, chest tightening with awe. This was what he had thought lost forever, the sound of joy at home, the sight of love taking root where grief had lived. He joined them, crouching beside Clara, his hands sinking into the soil with hers. Their fingers brushed, and for a moment the world seemed to narrow to that touch. She looked at him, eyes bright with unshed tears. "It feels like planting hope," she said softly. "It is," he answered, squeezing her hand. "Every seed we put down says tomorrow is worth fighting for." Emily giggled, pressing a small seed into the earth with solemn importance. "Then we'll have so much tomorrow, Pa." "You'll see." Ethan looked at her, then at Clara, then at the baby gurgling under the fading sky, and the weight of his promise deepened. Tomorrow. He would fight for every single one. That night, after the children slept, Clara stood by the window, gazing out at the stars. Ethan joined her, slipping an arm around her waist. "You're quiet," he murmured. "Just thinking," she said. "About how quickly things can change. About how fragile this all feels, even now." He turned her gently to face him, his thumb brushing her cheek. "It's fragile, yes, but it's also stronger than you know. Fire didn't take it, judgment didn't break it, and nothing will, not while I draw breath." Her tears fell then, not of sorrow, but of release. She leaned into his kiss, slow and tender, tasting healing in the simple truth of being chosen, of being safe. When they finally drew apart, the night seemed to hum around them, the prairie alive with crickets and the scent of sage. "Let's not waste another day being afraid," Ethan whispered. "We've already lost too many." She nodded, her forehead resting against his. "Then let's live, fully, fiercely, together." And so they did. If this chapter stirs warmth in your heart, if you feel the quiet healing woven through their fragile courage, let your voice be part of it. Share your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe so this story can reach others who may need its comfort. Stories of love and survival are lanterns in the dark, and every hand that carries one helps light the path for someone still searching. The prairie stretched wide under the endless sky, tomorrow's challenges waiting, but in that house at the edge of Redemption Creek, love had taken root, fragile, fierce, unyielding, and as dawn neared again, it carried the promise that no storm, no fire, no whisper of doubt could undo what they were building together. The prairie had begun to soften into spring when the next storm came, not of dust or fire, but of flesh and blood. It began one ordinary afternoon, Clara hanging linens in the yard, the children playing nearby, their laughter floating like lark song through the air. She caught sight of a rider cresting the hill, his silhouette cut sharp against the wide sky. Something in the way he sat, his horse, made her blood run cold. Arrogant, possessive, too familiar. Her hands stilled, clothespins slipping from her fingers. "Emily!" she called, keeping her tone even, though her heart hammered. "Take Daniel inside. Now!" The girl hesitated, shading her eyes toward the stranger. "But I want to see now." Clara's voice was steady but sharp enough that Emily gathered the baby and obeyed, disappearing into the safety of the house. Clara stood her ground among the billowing sheets as the rider drew closer, her stomach tightening with every step of his horse. When he halted at the fence line and swung down, she knew without needing to see his face. Lucas Tate. "Well, well," he drawled, tipping his hat with a smirk that had once stolen her breath but now only curdled her stomach. "Clara Monroe. Took me some time to track you down." Her voice came steady, though her hands trembled in her skirts. "You have no business here." He leaned against the fence post, eyes flicking over the land, the house, the laundry snapping in the wind. "Looks like you've done well for yourself. Cozy little arrangement with Cole, I hear. Widow man, lonely nights. Smart girl like you always knows how to make herself useful." Her jaw clenched, fury pushing back fear. "Leave, Lucas." Instead, he smiled wider, that same empty charm he'd once used to trap her in dreams that turned to dust. "I've been thinking. Man gets lonely on the trail. Starts missing what he left behind." His eyes darkened. "I left a son. My son. A boy needs his father." Clara's breath seized. "You gave up that right when you walked away." "Did I?" He shrugged. "Court might see it different. A judge won't take kindly to an unwed mother playing house with another man. But if you come back with me, we could fix it, make it proper. You'd be Mrs. Lucas Tate at last. I'd rather be dead." His smile sharpened, a knife's edge. "Careful with words like that. Folks might start to wonder what kind of mother talks of death when it comes to her child. Might even start to think you're unfit." Clara's stomach turned to ice. He was dangerous not just with fists or fire, but with lies. He'd twist truth until it strangled her. "What do you want?" she forced out. Simple. "Pack your things. Bring the boy. We'll be married inside a week, or I go to court and the law hands him to me. After all, blood counts for more than a widower's charity." Behind her, the house door creaked, and Ethan's voice cut like thunder. "That's enough." He strode across the yard, rifle in hand, eyes locked on Tate. His jaw was tight, his steps deliberate, the air around him charged with fury barely restrained. Clara felt her knees weaken with both relief and dread. "Cole," Lucas greeted, feigning ease, though his hand twitched at his side. "Good to see you. You've been keeping my woman warm, I hear." "She's not your anything," Ethan growled, halting just beyond the fence. "You abandoned her. You abandoned your son. You come here now with threats, and you think I'll stand by?" Lucas's smile turned poisonous. The law's on my side. Judges don't care about pretty speeches. They care about appearances. And right now it looks like you two been playing house. Unwed, indecent. I've already filed papers. The words hung heavy, a blade suspended above them. Clara's breath faltered, but Ethan's voice was steel. Then we'll change the story. Lucas cocked his head, suspicious. How? By marrying. Ethan stepped closer to Clara, never breaking Lucas's gaze. Tomorrow, let's see a judge call her unfit when she's the wife of a respectable rancher. Clara's breath caught, shock and fear crashing together. She turned to him, her eyes wide, her lips parting as if to protest. This wasn't how she wanted it, not forced, not rushed by threat. Yet when she saw the resolve in Ethan's face, the fierce protectiveness blazing in his eyes, her heart trembled with something more than fear. Lucas's laughter cut across the air, cruel and mocking. So, that's the plan? Marry her out of pity? Out of desperation? Well, go ahead. Won't change the truth. It changes everything, Ethan said firmly. His hand brushed Clara's arm, grounding her, claiming her. Because I'm not marrying out of pity. I'm marrying because I won't let you touch her or Daniel again. They're mine to protect, mine to keep. The word mine burned through her, terrifying and healing all at once. She met Ethan's gaze, saw not pity but truth, the quiet, steady truth of a man who had already chosen her long before he said it aloud. Lucas mounted again, sneering down at them. 3 days, he said. After that, the law decides. Enjoy your little wedding. He rode off, dust rising in his wake, leaving behind the smell of smoke and the echo of threats. Clara swayed, breath shuddering. Ethan turned to her, setting the rifle aside, his hands gentle now. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I should have asked different, but I won't let him take you. I won't let him take the boy. Her eyes filled, her heart caught between fear and fragile hope. Ethan, marriage isn't just protection. I know. His voice was steady, but beneath it she heard something raw, something that reached for her. It's also promise, and I mean to keep it. Her tears spilled then, not from fear, but from the dawning realization that his words were not a shield, but a vow. She nodded, her hand slipping into his, trembling yet sure. Then yes, she whispered. Yes, Ethan. The prairie wind stirred, cool and healing, carrying the scent of sage and smoke, wrapping around them like a benediction. And as the sun dipped low, casting the land in gold and shadow, Clara felt for the first time that the battle ahead would not be hers alone. If these moments move you, if you feel the fragile strength of love forging itself in fire and storm, let your heart answer, like leave a comment, subscribe so more stories of healing can reach those who wait for them. Each word of encouragement carries warmth, and warmth, like love, multiplies when shared. That night, under the hush of stars, Ethan and Clara planned what would come next, a wedding not of grandeur, but of defiance and devotion. And though shadows loomed, their joined hands promised something stronger. Together they could weather anything. Spring crept softly across the Colorado plains, painting the fields with wildflowers that swayed like prayers in the wind. The coal ranch, once scarred by fire and shadowed by trial, now breathed with a new rhythm. the rhythm of family. Clara stood on the porch of the rebuilt barn, her apron dusted with flour, her hair loose in the afternoon breeze. In the yard, Ethan pushed Emily higher and higher on a swing tied to the great oak, her laughter ringing like church bells. Daniel, now toddling on chubby legs, staggered after them with stubborn determination, each fall cushioned by grass and followed by a triumphant squeal. Clara's heart swelled until she thought it might burst. This life, ordinary, precious, was what she had prayed for in the darkest nights when loneliness had been her only companion. And now, by the grace of courage and the fierce tenderness of love, it was hers. Healing, slow but steady, had seeped into every corner of her soul, mending wounds that once seemed unfixable. "Careful, little man," Ethan called, catching Daniel before he could topple into the dirt. "Your mamma will have my hide if you ruin another pair of breeches." His voice carried both sternness and laughter, that rare warmth Clara still marvelled at whenever it broke through the granite of his grief. Daniel squealed, reaching out for her, and Clara came down the steps, gathering him against her chest. She breathed in the sweet, earthy scent of him, mixed with the sunshine itself. 2 years had passed since the custody battle, and every day had been both a labor and a gift. The ranch thrived, not by ease, but by sheer persistence. Clara learned to mend fences, to tend stock, to stand in a field shoulder to shoulder with Ethan as equal and partner. He learned to listen to her laughter, to trust her judgment, to let her love ease the weight he had carried alone. Emily bloomed under their care, a bright and daring child with ink-stained fingers from her lessons and grass-stained hems from her adventures. And Daniel, he was no longer just her son, but their son, Ethan's, as much in spirit as in blood. Yet the past never vanished fully. There were nights Clara would wake from dreams of fire or the echo of Lucas Tate's threats. There were mornings Ethan's eyes lingered too long on Margaret's old portrait, grief and love entwined in ways he could not unravel. But rather than divide them, those shadows became threads that bound them closer. They spoke of loss openly, of mistakes and forgiveness, of the fragile beauty of second chances. Healing, they discovered, was not forgetting, but choosing love every day despite the scars. When Catherine Winters, Margaret's sister, wrote of her upcoming wedding in Boston, Clara felt both joy and dread. The invitation promised reunion and confrontation, for Samuel Cole, Ethan's estranged father, would be there. The journey east was long, the city overwhelming in its grandeur. Yet it was there. Clara saw Ethan's courage tested anew. Samuel, rigid and proud, met them with words sharp enough to wound. But Ethan did not bow. He stood firm beside her, his arm steady around her waist, declaring without shame that she was his wife, that Daniel was his son, that their family was not lesser for being forged in hardship. For the first time, Clara saw the boy who had once craved his father's approval release that weight, choosing instead the family he had built with his own hands. They returned home changed, not by reconciliation, but by resolve. The ranch looked smaller after Boston's towering spires, yet more precious. The swing under the oak, the kitchen smelling of bread and soap, the starlit porch where Ethan's hand always found hers. These were riches beyond any inheritance. One evening, as the sun melted into gold across the horizon, Emily curled on Clara's lap, her voice drowsy. "Tell me again, Mamma. Tell me how you came to us." Clara smiled. stroking her hair, her heart softening as she began. It was a dark and stormy night. The wind howled, the dust burned my eyes, and I thought I would never find shelter. But then, through the storm, I saw a light. A man with a strong voice and a broken heart opened his door. And in that house, I found not just safety, but a home. Emily sighed with contentment. And then? And then, Clara whispered, kissing her brow, we became a family. Ethan, listening from the porch, caught Clara's gaze, and in the silence between them was everything. Gratitude, devotion, the sacred recognition that love had not erased their pain, but had redeemed it. Together they had chosen life, chosen one another, chosen to believe that even the most battered souls could bloom again. As the stars pricked the sky with light, Clara looked upward, whispering thanks, not just for survival, but for abundance, for storms that had led her here, for fire that had forged love, for healing that came not in grand miracles, but in simple, daily grace. This was not an ending. This was a beginning that would stretch across countless tomorrows, each one imperfect and precious. Their story was still being written in laughter, in work, in whispered prayers at dawn. And perhaps somewhere beyond the stars, Margaret watched with quiet approval, her memory not diminished but honored in the happiness her family had found. Love, Clara knew, was not a fairy tale. It was soil and seed, storm and fire, loss and renewal. It was choosing again and again to stay, to forgive, to believe. And as she held her children close, as Ethan's arms slipped around her shoulders, she felt it pulse through her like the heartbeat of the earth itself, healing, eternal, unbreakable. If this journey of love and healing has touched your heart, if you felt the warmth of their struggles and victories as your own, let your voice be heard. Leave a comment and share what family means to you. Press like to spread this story of resilience and redemption. And subscribe so you won't miss the next tale of courage, tenderness, and the way love always finds its way home.